Sometimes with cars, take one is really just a warm-up for take two. Today, it's take two on the ignition system upgrade on the 240. So last time we left off, we were trying to do an ignition system upgrade on our supercharged KA240SX. That involved converting from a Ford wasted spark system to what we were hoping, an individual sequential ignition coil-on plug setup. It turned out through some experimentation with that and through letting some smoke out of some coils that the setup that I'm using currently isn't configured in a way in which we can do individual coil control. That doesn't mean that we have to abandon the idea of doing individual coil on plug, and it doesn't mean that there's not going to be any benefits to doing an upgrade. I would still like to make this work. Last time I went ahead and made a harness for these coils that didn't previously exist in the setup to give them a power, ground, and signal. These are considered smart coils. These units out of a Nissan Maxima from the year 2000 provide a nice robust spark. However, the setup for them was incorrect the first go around. So I don't remember which one of these is the burnt out. It's this one. So the main problem was the coils were being given a signal all the time. So from basically the moment the computer turned on, these coils were gaining dwell. Dwell meaning it's basically building up the energy inside of it so that at the moment of ignition, it can release that energy and create a nice spark. The reason for that isn't easy to explain. There's a lot going on here at play as to why that would or wouldn't work, and there's a lot that we just frankly don't know. The number one thing is we were following a thread of somebody else that was doing this, and in that case, they were using a wasted spark setup, not a sequential ignition setup, not a fully independent setup like we were trying to do. In fact, I had done pretty extensive modification to the ECU to accomplish that, but we didn't have enough inputs on the ECU to have everything we needed. As far as we could tell, nobody has written about doing this with our computer, which, by the way, Megasquirt MS2 3.0. So we were kind of flying blind with that stuff. What we came up against is what the computer wanted. It was looking for not just a crank signal to tell where the engine position is, it wanted a cam signal. It wanted to know where the camshaft was in relation basically to how every cylinder is positioned and what stroke they are on, because this is a 4-stroke motor, so the piston doesn't just come up and then, have the explosion send it down. It comes up, has the explosion, goes down, comes up, pushes the exhausts out, and goes back down. So there's an additional sequence of events there, and for a fully independent setup like that, you need that additional information. I misspoke last time. I said that the KA did not have a cam angle sensor. It doesn't exactly, but these engines did use a standard distributor, which can act as a cam angle sensor. For the case of what we're doing here, we're frankly out of inputs on the ECU. We were already stretching it very, very thin to get the 4 signals to the coils. So we're going to back it up just a little bit here and move back to doing wasted spark. Wasted spark just means that 1 and 4 are connected, 2 and 3 are connected. Whenever there is in the sequence a cylinder up on 1 or 4, we're getting a spark. Now, that does mean that there is a spark during the exhaust cycle and the combustion cycle, but as I kind of mentioned last time, that's not a huge drawback, and we're still getting the benefit of a much more powerful spark from our individual coils. That's where we're at right now. I've already modified the harness to adapt to that style, so essentially the signal wire is just joined for 1 and 4 and 2 and 3. So there's 2 less wires going down to the ECU. That means we have 2 spare pins that are now magically available to us for future whatever. All I need to do now is go ECU side and hook up those wires to pins 1 and 2 and give these coils power again. and we should be ready to test. I did buy 2 new coils because we had one that really melted. We had one that got a little warm. For the time being, I'm going to leave these as they are so that we don't end up, needing even more $30 coils because we let the smoke out. All right, well, I think we're ready to begin actual testing here. Testing isn't going to be quite as exciting as getting the car running because although we didn't have any great success last time, I did learn something new about the powers of my ECU. It has a test output mode that can allow me basically to fire the injectors or fire a coil on a non-running engine. And with that, we can test these coils to see if they are configured right, see if they're wired right, see if we get unexpected smoke, and as well, see if they are actually sparking. So in the current configuration, should be able to have Spark A fire both coils 1 and 4, and Spark B fire 2 and 3. I'm not entirely sure that Spark B is currently configured. That's one of the mystery areas for me. But now it's time to get into doing that. So I've finished up inside of the car. Wiring sure makes a mess out of your carpet, I've learned. And my wiring is still kind of a disaster at the moment. But on iteration number 45 or whatever this is now, things start to get messy. However, I am confident that I have things right, he says with no confidence in his voice. So we got the laptop plugged in, and I should be able to fire up the car, fire up the electronics of the car. I have the fuel pump disabled, I have the fan disabled, so we're not drawing anything, and start testing the coil. All right, key is on. Should have nothing extraordinary going on right now, but you can see that the ECU has woken up, and we have our gauge readings, and you can always tell if it's working or not based on the manifold air temperature. It's about 85, 90 degrees out here, and that is correct. So we have power to the ECU. So at this point, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hook up one of the coils, and I'm going to hook up one of the burnt out ones, probably number 1, and see if it gets hot, see if it has any problems. Now the ECU shouldn't be sending this any signal right now. In fact, I really should have used my multimeter and power probe to test this first, but what can I say? I was feeling frisky. So what I currently want is to see signal reading no voltage, correct? Ground reading ground, correct? And power reading whatever voltage the ECU has. Currently that is only 9.1, which is not fantastic, and that may just be because our ECU or our battery has gotten a little low. Our ECU has gotten low? Yeah, it's very low. It's in the floorboard. So that all seems nominal there. What I would like to do now is remove this number 1 coil and let's go ahead and pull spark plug number 1 and plug this in to the wiring harness again. I'm going to leave that over here next to the intake manifold so that it can ground to something and hopefully we get a nice spark. So here's where it gets fun, or here's where it gets smoky. We are going to go to advanced and do output test mode, and in here what I'm going to do is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, hit tab, and that will basically enable the test mode as soon as I hit burn, which I will do now. We have everything off, and yes, everything is off. Now on the test modes here, we currently are in no test mode. If we go to coils, that's going to basically give us a test mode for the coil that I currently have it set to every 3,000 milliseconds, every 3 seconds basically. It's going to do a coil event on coil output A. It only has a 1 millisecond dwell, so a very short dwell period just to wake it up, and that's what this coil should be using anyway. So in theory, if I hit this, yep, I don't know if you can hear it. We got spark. So in this mode, the coil is working, and that is coil output A, that is number 1 cylinder, and it's firing every 3 seconds. All right, nope, still going. I thought it ran out of cycles, but nope, still going. I'm gonna stop this now, and we're gonna try it on cylinder number 4. Okay, everybody's off. You can see it has stopped sparking. I'm gonna use this same coil and coil assembly, but we're just gonna move harness. We're gonna move down to number 4 here. It's very important when you're doing this, obviously, that you don't have fuel lingering around. Like I said, I have the fuel pump disabled, and I have not charged the fuel system, so we have no fuel present. Now let's try this again with number 4. And it is working. Yep. Good, strong looking spark there. Okay, so number 1's working, number 4 is working. I'm very curious about 2 and 3. Now I need to change configuration here, so I actually need to get out of this mode, so I need to type in 0 and hit burn. And I believe this will require me to cycle the ECU in order to basically reset back to standard. Okay, now with it back to default settings, let's see if we can find coil B. And we have. So I'm going to choose the same settings, but I'm going to turn test mode off so that it's not going right out of the gate. The first thing I'm going to want to do is just make sure that we have power and all that good stuff to number 2, and make sure that it shows a signal to the computer. We have on the positive power. In the middle we have ground. But interestingly, and I'm so glad that I checked this before I tested it, we have 4.7 volts on the signal. If I were to plug this coil in to number 2 right now, poof, we would overheat that coil. So this is the point where we need to figure out why it's sending constant signal to number 2. All right, so I think we figured out the reason for Spark B not working, and this goes back to the last video. The sequence in here isn't 1, 2, 3, 4. It isn't even A, B, C, D. It is A, C, B, D. And I wired that up to be A, B, C, D to the 4 spares. So currently I have 2 and 3 switched. Whether that had anything to do with the problems last time, I don't really think so. We did enough research after the fact to realize that it was never going to work in the last setup. But I do need to change that now, but it should be a simple switch, just a matter of switching 2 and 3 here. I'm going to leave them hooked up for now, even though we're not going to end up using the other 2 channels at this point, but never know what the future holds. All right, so we got 2. Let me double check here. Spare 1 shouldn't have moved. Spare 1 has not moved. 2 now goes to spare 3. 3 now goes to spare 2. Got it. All right, with everything reconfigured, now we should be able to do the test on Spark B and get Spark A on cylinder number 2. I should go ahead and check number 3 while I'm here, just to make sure. But if we do have Spark on number 3, it's possible we might be ready to begin actual testing here. We don't know what's going to happen with the actual timing control. In theory, nothing has changed as far as the engine position sensor, and we haven't changed any timing settings. So in theory, everything should be ready to go still. So we have all 4 cylinders now showing spark on their coils, and when the coils are plugged in, they don't, go up in flames. So that's all very good.
Hello?
Hello?
I'm on my laptop.
Okay. Wave to the people.
Hi, people.
You didn't wave.
Hey, in theory, if you crank, we should see RPM, and if that's good, then it should just start up with fuel.
Okay, I have fuel off, and I have no coils plugged in. I'm just going to have coil number 1 plugged in and see if we get spark, maybe?
Okay, yeah, that's good.
Although I don't know how I'm going to be able to visually see that. You're in charge.
Oh no. How do I... Okay, so we're not getting the engine speed.
Okay. I guess step 1 is to check continuity of the circuit.
Yeah,
That's pin 24, right?
it should be pin 24, yes.
I found out later that the pins are actually written on the end of the plug. Alright, I got positive continuity. And then ground should be pin 1. And negative continuity.
Negative continuity?
Well, I mean, ground continuity.
Okay.
I can't really test the shield, but that shouldn't. You know, I'd almost started to miss spending quality time with my little circuit board here. Turned out that through our investigations last night, some mysteries were uncovered with this board. The current setup is actually for an optical sensor. That is essentially what a cam angle sensor would have been, and it is just set up completely, entirely in a way that the optical sensor would be enabled. We don't have one of those. We talked about that last time. I don't currently have a setup for a cam angle sensor, and it is and was running off of a VR sensor. The difference, basically, the VR is the magnetic pulses, and an optical sensor is, well, just what it sounds like. It's an optical sensor, like it's shining a light and seeing pulses in light. So we uncovered the setup for the board for VR setup. I honestly have no idea how this was working before. My best theory is that the EDIS system handled all of the timing to a degree that I know there was an output from the EDIS to the ECU. It must have just been using that in some way or another to control timing. I have really no idea. Neither of us do. And that's why we were getting no engine speed during cranking, and we obviously were not getting any ignition because the ECU had no idea what was going on with the engine. So I need to do some work here on the board in order to basically hook up the inputs from the VR sensor into some of the inputs on the ECU so that the tune can, be set up to have VR input. I'm doing this inside today because it's freaking hot out there. So, garage office. All right, so currently we have tack select going over to XG1. Tack select needs to be going to VR in. So that's just a short jump there. And then I need to get from T select to VR out. We've got like a loop right here. I don't know what that is. It almost looks like a loop of solder or a loop of solid wire between the two. So this needs to be severed and connected just from here to here and from here to here. I don't really know what I'm dealing with here. I'm going to touch this with the iron and see what happens. I don't know if this is a solid piece of wire. Okay, well, the whole thing's going to come out when I heat it up. Be free. I guess it's just a piece of solid aluminum wire. And I guess I could do one at a time here. You know, there's an advantage to working inside. There's some company in here, right, Xerxes? I said, right, Xerxes? Yeah, he looks thrilled. He looks thrilled to have company as well. All right, so that's our two modifications made. We have both the T-cell to VR out, and we have VR in over to TAC select. All right, with the modifications complete, just one last thing. While we have a chance to view it, see those two blue boxes? Those are what you may hear me talking about later as we're trying to adjust the signal for the VR sensor. So those two are basically noise filters, and those screws in the top are what adjust how much filtering they're doing so that we can get a clean signal from the VR source. Right, Xerxes? I said, right, Xerxes? Yep.
Yeah.
All right, can you see it?
Yep. I got Spark. Currently in the studio is still offline. I don't know if he got disconnected or something, but I did see Spark. We got Spark, and I did catch that it said cranking.
Well,
I guess it.
everything's shaking. Yeah, it started up like everything was as it always was. All right, good job, talking laptop. You did great.
Thank you.
I mean, you are the talking laptop.
Oh.
You're like the computer from Star Trek.
Beep, boop.
That's not what they sound like. So yay, hooray, we have a running engine again. It was starting to look not so great as to if I was going to hear this thing anytime soon, but I'm glad to hear it. Now I can fully remove all of the old ignition system, basically. So we have all this stuff over here in the firewall that can go. A future goal for a future time is I'm going to basically remake the whole engine harness for this, because at this point we have so many redundant wires in there for the old ignition system, and the new one takes so few wires that the whole engine harness is actually getting pared down pretty significantly. Things we still need to work on: the TAC. We still need to figure out how to get the ECU to output a signal for the TAC, but we do now have 2 extra outputs on the ECU because we're only using 2 coil outputs. So that shouldn't be too terribly hard. And for the time being, I could actually use either the output on the ECU, or I have a phone that I can like Velcro to the dash and get all my gauges there. One thing I've wanted to do is actually put an Android radio in the car, just have an Android screen, so that I could run the Megascore viewer, basically dashboard on that. And it's just a future goal, but for now it's all working. So I'm going to go ahead and wire up the launch control system, because there's no reason not to, and then we'll have to do some test drives to see how it's reacting. Sure, it started and idled fine, but we do need to make sure that it is operating correctly under boost, and we need to see what gap the spark plugs want to run at now, because before I had them down very, very low, like lower than 0.22, which is lower than you'd like on a street car for sure. It'd be great to get those up above 0.3, somewhere in that range. So just open up that gap a little bit, and should have a steadier idle then. It certainly felt like it ran a little snappier, like there wasn't any hesitation into it getting on throttle, but a lot of road testing to do yet. While I was kind of redoing things here, I decided to take this opportunity to switch from using the clutch pedal launch control to a button launch control. What I really want is a momentary switch, momentary button to just press and hold during the launch and then release as soon as I drop the clutch. Unfortunately, I don't think that's the kind of button that I got here, but we'll get started on that now. All right, we now turn our attention inside the car. So previously, if you watched the old launch control video, I had it activated on the clutch switch, which was a problem for me because I use this car for autocross and, as well as, driving around. There were situations where the launch control was becoming active and I didn't really want it to become active. It just didn't give me enough control on when it was engaging. So I've decided to go for a toggle switch, or not even a toggle switch, a momentary switch basically. So when I push this red button, it should enable that system. Now I have grounded that out to a nice solid ground on the handbrake and run the other side of that over to the ECU. Now I went in there and was fully prepared to, make a new pin and everything like that, only to discover I did that, apparently, when I was doing the coils. So after putting that all back together and hooking it up, we should be ready to see if launch control is still functional, even though we're using a completely different circuit now. Currently I have green on launch, and I don't want that. Launch control is always active, so that is not currently working. Alright, good news everyone. I think I have got it fixed. Had nothing to do with the ECU. I just apparently felt like taking apart the ECU one more time for posterity's sake, but it seems like everything is working now. So launch control is back and working, and I am now on spark and fuel cut, so it's not nearly as dangerous for the engine as it used to be. It's currently set to very tame settings, and that's kind of what I just am gonna test with and then work our way up to the more aggressive settings. But at this point, we're pretty much ready to start trying on-the-road testing. Once I hook the fan back up, because I noticed the temperature's rising quickly. All right. Feeling good. So right out of the gate, it still does have a little bit of a random miss, but I haven't got the spark plugs back up or up at all yet, so I suppose I should expect that. I think my seatbelt's gonna hit the mic. It's gonna have to do. General cruising wise, seems the same. It's not lugging, it's not missing or acting like it's struggling, so that's good. I should go ahead and start some data logging. Be interesting to see. Really shouldn't be dramatically different in any way. Still leaves fire behind it on decel. Important things you wouldn't want to lose. I want to try and get decently far away from anything before I go testing launch control. mostly because it might be quite loud. I'd say it's working. I gotta figure out how I'm gonna launch it though. I really want a momentary switch, not a press and release switch. That's pretty obnoxious. As if it wasn't obnoxious enough before. We're gonna need new tires before that's useful in any degree. Momentary switch would make it perfect though. If I can find the same kind of switch, but just deactivates whenever I release it, we are golden. I was gonna try and get a little video of it, like just in the driveway, but hearing it now, I don't think that's a great idea. That should be all the info I need. Put some grippy tires on there. We're gonna start to find the limits of axles and drive shafts. I don't think we're not making numbers that are insane. Like, it's not throwing me back or anything like that. But launching off a two-step like that, it's a much bigger hit to everything. Clutch does fantastic. That white bunny setup, highly rated. I think that is one of the best things you could do to a KA. Let's see if I can set a camera up somewhere. I don't think that it's throwing fire, but it could be. All right, that's a wrap on our ignition system upgrade for the 240. Looking at some data logs and stuff like that, and I have nothing but really good news to report. Everything has gone super smooth. This all started, many months ago when I had this stupid idea in my head that I needed to use the launch control setting that the Megasquirt had built into it, and all that kind of snowballed into ZK basically getting the idea that fully independent ignition would be great, but we had to kind of backtrack, and now we just have individual coil on plug set up. The good news is I do think it is actually a better ignition system for this setup. I will say half accidentally, I know I don't have any methanol in the car right now, and that's been a constant, but I also wasn't running the water injection at all currently. So it was a very hot day with no water injection, and I was doing some pretty strong pulls with the thing. And here's the thing, it never broke up. I never had a misfire or any ignition issues on power during any of those pulls. And if you look at the data here, if you know what you're looking at, then great. If you don't, all you need to know is this red line on the third row is the intake air temperature post supercharger. And that intake air temperature peaks at 185 degrees during the third gear of this pull. Every gear, basically, that temperature just climbs and climbs and climbs as it's compressing that air, and things are moving faster, things are working harder. Intake temps get really high. In the previous iteration, and especially many years ago when the setup was kind of in its infancy, a lot of breakup issues, a lot of issues where it would either misfire or no fire or just start to run kind of crummy with really high intake temps like that, and no issues at all. Not enough testing here to say that that would be completely solved, but some really solid results. Very, very happy with that. My AFRs kind of creeped up a little bit leaner than I would like during the kind of end of the pulls, but like I said, I didn't really go out there and do full clean pulls, and this is not a dyno test. You know, there's a lot of discrepancy in data here, but to me, everything looked really positive. So now if we can stack onto that some methanol or just water cooling, get those air intake temperatures down, I think this is going to be a good, reliable setup. I feel really confident about the engine setup going out to autocross now. So pretty much for me, I'm going to be much more focused in on getting the rest of the car ready and, of course, getting the ramp truck ready so that we can get back to doing some autocross. And I'm super excited about that. I did look at the data at the end there where I did the different launch control settings, and I can notice distinct differences between doing the fuel and spark cut, which is the nice safe option, versus just doing fuel cut, which was the kind of really unsafe option, versus doing just spark cut, which is the really fun option. The fuel and spark looks great. It holds 3,000 RPM beautifully. There's not really any creep in intake temps or anything. It's very calm. Well, I wouldn't say it's very calm. It's actually pretty violent. It actually does a pretty good shaking, and it leaves hard. The spark cut, certainly, you get a ton of variance in the AFRs because you're having exhaust pulses with full fuel, and then you're having exhaust pulses with no fuel at all. So the numbers are just all over the place. But it really didn't look bad. I wasn't too worried about that. Some people are going to say, oh gosh, don't do that. You're going to burn up your wideband. Don't worry. This is not something that we're going to be using on a daily, and I really wouldn't even use it at autocross because most of the events at autocross are going to be, in residential areas, and it's loud. I literally went to a shooting range in order to get the clips for the end there because it's loud. Unfortunately, microphones can't really do justice to what it is like, but it's loud. Well, hey, thanks for joining along in this stage of the journey, and I look forward to seeing you next time as we continue to march towards getting back to actually dodging some cones. I'm back.